Right now, let's bring in Congressman Michael McCaul, the chair of the House Homeland Security Committee. Mr. Chairman, thank you for joining us this morning.
George.
You've seen the intelligence. Do you believe that ISIS poses the kind of threat that General Allen just talked about, and do you support what he's calling for?
Well, I do think they present the greatest threat we've seen since 9/11. This has been festering for the last year, and now it's culminating with the killing and beheading of an American journalist, which I think is a turning point. The American people, it has sort of opened their eyes to what ISIS really is, the true character of ISIS, how savage they really are, and their intent to harm Americans. And not just my words, but their words will drown Americans in their own blood, will raise the black flag of al-Qaeda over the White House. So they are very intent on not only establishing the caliphate in Syria and Iraq, but expanding that to external operations, not only in Europe, but they would love more than nothing else to hit the United States of America.
Congressman, if you get the kind of expansion you and General Allen then are talking about, won't that require a new authorization from Congress? The 2001 authorization targeted al-Qaeda, not ISIS. It would be a real stretch to put this under the Iraq authorization of 2002. So won't Congress have to act here?
We believe that the administration should be in consultation with Congress. So far they have under the War Powers Act. But once that period of time expires, we believe it's necessary to come back to the Congress to get additional authorities and to update, if you will, the authorized use of military force. With respect to General Allen's comments on regional strategy, I wholeheartedly agree. I believe that America, the United States, shouldn't bear this burden alone. We have regional allies, both Muslim allies and European allies, that can bring a lot of pressure on ISIS. And I don't think you're gonna win this with a containment policy alone. This administration thus far has only dealt with containment. We need to expand these airstrikes so that we can ultimately defeat and eliminate ISIS, because I would far prefer to eliminate them over here than have to deal with them in the United States.
That's the question. How serious a threat do they actually pose to the homeland right now?
Their focus right now is establishing the caliphate, but don't kid yourself for a second. They aren't intent on hitting the West, and there are external operations, I believe, underway. And the biggest threat, George, is this. Unlike Afghanistan and Pakistan, this is very accessible. We have tens of thousands of foreign fighters from all over the world pouring into this safe haven that's now been established, including hundreds of Americans with Western passports and legal travel documents, which would enable them not only to travel to Western Europe, but to the United States. And then you couple that with their now newly formed alliance announced a couple days ago with AQAP in Yemen, which is the premier al-Qaeda bomb maker. Now you have a threat to airplanes blowing up, and also the traditional sort of Times Square bomber that we saw in New York. So I believe the threat's very real. I think the FBI, Homeland Security officials believe it's real. That's why they sent out a be on the lookout to state and locals for suspicious activity. Okay. And particularly on social media, which they're very adept at doing.
Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for your time this morning. I want to bring that right to Richard Clark. You say the United States has to act right now as if it's already been hit.
I think we have to imagine ourselves a month from now, 6 months from now, with an attack in New York. And then we say to ourselves, boy, I wish we had done something back then. So why aren't we doing it now? Why wait for it to happen? There's no evidence of a plot right now. There's no evidence of people having come back from the theater. But we might not know. Our system is good. It's much better than it was in 2001. But it's not 100%. And we won't know, perhaps, until something goes off.
And there does seem to be some debate inside the administration, Martha, over how serious this threat is to us right now.
Well, you heard Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel say it was an imminent threat to everywhere, anywhere. I'm not sure that everyone agrees with that. This is more of a conventional army with ISIS. They've got equipment. They're trying to take territory, which is very different from al-Qaeda, and they want to establish a caliphate, as we've said again and again, over there. If we get in the way, if America gets in the way, if Western powers get in the way, then they'll go after us, I think. But in terms of imminent to this country, even the FBI says not right now.
Of course, we were all struck this week by those horrific pictures of James Foley, which has led to the question of whether or not the United States should be paying ransom for hostages. I want to bring that to Rukmini Callimachi from the New York Times, done some real groundbreaking reporting on this issue for the New York Times. And you had a story just a couple of weeks ago where you talked about Europe bankrolling al-Qaeda terror. You wrote, al-Qaeda and its direct affiliates have taken in at least least $125 million in revenue from kidnappings since 2008, of which $66 million was paid just last year. The United States says it does not pay ransom. The European governments deny it as well, but it does appear that Europeans have paid ransom in some fashion.
Yes, absolutely. It's very clear from my reporting that European governments are paying ransoms. They're doing it through a system of proxies. So, for instance, in North Africa, they were able to hide the ransom payments as a humanitarian aid payment to the country where the hostages are being held, and the money is then transferred to the terrorists by the host country. It is a growing problem, and as colleagues have said, I think it needs to come out of the shadows. I think that Europe needs to own up to what they're doing, and we need to have a frank discussion about this, because what's happening now is that if an American citizen or a British citizen, which is another country that does not pay, if they are taken alongside Europeans, they are the most likely to be killed because we don't pay.
You talk about this being a hidden debate. I think that's exactly right. Do you see any sense right now that the Europeans are rethinking their policy?
Not really. I mean, we've just had more than a dozen European hostages released from ISIS custody, and the reporting I've done has shown that they've paid between 1.5 and 2 million euros apiece to have them be released. There's two young Italian women who have recently been kidnapped, and we're already hearing stories about Italian officials on the border with Turkey and Syria looking for a go-between to be able to get the ransom money across.
Okay, Rukmini Callimachi, thanks very much. I know you have more reporting coming in. And Richard Clark, let me bring this to you. Her point about the bankrolling of terror, so significant. ISIS has become such a well-financed group.
Well, George, it's been well-financed in part because it's taken over territory that had banks in it. So it actually is probably the best financed terrorist group we've ever faced. But this issue of paying for hostages is a very tough one. No one wants their loved one to be killed. They want to do everything when it's them. But if any American or any Brit, anyone from Europe pays, then we're all at risk. Then we all become targets, those of us who travel in the Middle East. We can't pay.
No rethinking on the part of the administration?
I don't think there's any rethinking at all. It certainly is something that should be debated and looked at, but it's a very complicated issue. And it's true, if you start paying, they'll probably take more.
Okay, Martha Raddatz, Richard Clark, thanks very much.